Hi everyone, my name is Noemi, and today we'll talk about the topic of sport at work. For that, we took a look at current trends and different opinions on the subject and the benefits and/or harms of sport at work. So we went out into the field to find out. First, we interviewed Kathleen Labouze, Managing Director and Chief Financial Officer of Wells Fargo Securities Europe for 5 years. Next, we interviewed Emmanuel Jubez, Human Resources Director at Football Group. Finally, we conducted a questionnaire survey to gain a better understanding of certain people's relationship with sport. Let's take a closer look at what this is all about.
We received 108 answers to our survey. The people who answered have very different profiles: men, women, people of all age groups, but not over 60. There are people who work in many different sectors, like hospitals, big companies, public sector, and students, and people who don't work. While 29.8% of our respondents take part in sport 2 or 3 times a week, about 26.3% do so once a week, only around 12% do so twice a month, and for 26.3%, it's less than once a month. Yet, for 103 out of 108 people, sports contribute to relaxation, well-being, and a balanced lifestyle. It's a way of growing out and staying healthy. If the actions don't always follow the will, for 57.9%, it's because they feel they don't have enough time to do sports. For 85.6% of the people who questioned, they believe it's because of work, studies, and family. And for 15.4%, it's because they are not interested or motivated for sports. Thus, if group sports sessions would set up during their working hours at work, they would be really interested, and 71.9% of them would take part. However, for about 73%, they would be against a session if they were compulsory, because for them freedom comes first. For these people, such an obligation would be unreasonable. It should remain a leisure activity, and it's not up to the employer to impose the practice of sport. Our conclusion is that most of our sample would welcome sports in the workplace and during working hours. However, it should remain optional at everyone's discretion. Thus, through our first interview, we have noticed that in practice it will be interesting for employees of large companies to benefit from sports sessions at work. In fact, according to our interviewee, managing director and chief financial officer, they have very, very busy schedules with lots of meetings and presentation, which doesn't allow them to take part. She thinks that in practice, the proposal would be really, really expensive to implement, but it would reinforce self-improvement, productivity, and above all, the well-being of its employees. However, this should be on a voluntary basis, so everyone can develop as they wish and not seeing this as an additional constraint. For our second interview, we called Emmanuel Gervais, an HR director that implemented a CrossFit session at some of her companies once a week. This project was an opportunity given by the prevention organism IRP Auto that offered 1 year of free weekly CrossFit sessions to fight against sedentariness. The HR team was really interested in this project, and when they talked to the workers at the Troy sites, they decided to make it happen. Mrs. Gervais believes that this sport won't just be help to improve the physical health of her employees, but also their psychological health and the communication between colleagues. As she explains, even if the team are already close, seeing each other in another environment, in sportswear and sweat, make it even easier to feel at ease with colleagues. It also makes everybody feel equal as everyone participates in the session: administrative teams, car repairmen, interns, and even the CEO. It was really easy to implement as they just had to call the organism and find a coach. Now they also implemented it in another car repair shops in Paris and Lyon. However, the hard part was to motivate people. For some sites, they didn't have enough participants because people weren't motivated. Nonetheless, for the sites where it worked, everybody is really satisfied by it. Some employees that have abandoned sports reason to work out. Now that the 3 sessions are coming out to the end, the HR still decided to continue the initiative. For Mrs. Gervais, the key to this kind of project is motivation of the HR and of the employees.
So, in light of these findings, we attempted to provide a theoretical framework upon which to base our analysis. We found that there was a pretty extensive literature on the matter of exercise at work, amongst which a paper from the International Journal of Workplace Health Management from 2008 that provided some insights on the link between sports practices in the workplace and work performance. By attempting a study on 3 different companies in the south of England and across 201 respondents, the research analyzed the self-reported patterns in mood and performance on exercise days versus non-exercise days. Reports showed that a better mood, meaning well-being, motivation, involvement, and overall a better job performance, including ability to concentrate, problem solving, resilience, etc., were superior on exercise days, regardless of intensity or type of exercise practiced. So this proved that exercise at work was somewhat positively linked to a better mood and to a more accurate job performance. Another study from the Meiji Yasuda Shinjuku Medical Center in Tokyo collected data on 1,321 company workers with regards to their exercising patterns at work, job performance, and overall mental well-being and health. The results did show, again, a consistent link between work engagement and frequent workless exercise, regardless of activity levels, once again, but not between exercise and psychological distress levels, which varied greatly according to demographic factors, so sex, age, BMI, etc. Also, depending on the job type, the link between work vigor and workplace exercise was more or less prominent, with sedentary and white-collar jobs benefiting the most from exercise, whereas service or sales-central jobs or jobs involving moving around a lot benefited less from it. Finally, the Physical Culture and Sports Studies and Research Quarterly conducted a survey that showed that Danish office workers were increasingly driven towards attempting to implement exercise at work into their routines, with no less than 43% of respondents wishing to explore this option. And their motivation, that used to be more so focused on the quest towards companionship, a sense of belonging and bonding, are now directed towards health reasons, both physical and mental. So these findings are, however, to be nuanced as they focus more so on the white-collar experience, on white-collar workers, and on specific geographic zones, on top of relying on self-reported and self-assessed patterns, which could be more or less unreliable from a scientific point of view. But overall, all 3 studies still push for executives to explore their options with regards to adapting their own implementation of exercise practices in the workplace as a way to support mental health and job performance in the workplace as a whole.
Although in theory, implementing sport in the workplace is something highly beneficial, we need to point out the limitations of this conclusion. Indeed, if it were so beneficial, this model would have been adopted everywhere. The fact that it isn't the case shows us that it isn't so easy to incorporate sport in the corporate world. The first reason that could explain this is the cost. It would take up working time and would require heavy investment in sport facilities or paying trained professionals. For some companies, it is quite difficult to evaluate the added efficiency of its employees after they implement sport in a workplace, and they deem these additional costs as not beneficial for the company. Furthermore, due to the estate situation, which can be completely clogged in some big cities, this investment in new facilities can be not only difficult or very expensive to put into place, but simply impossible. And there is a high correlation between the closeness to sport facilities and sport in the workplace. So this is another hindrance. And furthermore, there's also the question of tailoring the solution to its employees. And previously, aforementioned studies show that there are different needs. For instance, men tend to prefer competitive games made in groups, such as soccer, whereas women tend to prefer individual sports, such as fitness or yoga. And therefore, the company needs to make expensive choices that can't target the company as a whole. And these efforts can be seen as too difficult or demanding for a restricted target. And lastly, we have to take into account the fact that although there are changes in the workplace and a general desire for a more healthy working environment and more work-life balance, these considerations are still slow to take root and require profound societal change. Although our field and literature research tend to show that people are responding positively to the idea of sport in the workplace, very few, if not at all, seem to be actively seeking out such change, which can give the impression that there is no need for companies to put this into place. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We hope that you found this interesting.